Hello, and welcome to Michell Consulting's webinar series for our Michell University. Today we're going to be talking about customer returns in Infor FACTS. This webinar will be recorded. It will be available on our website at www.mitchellgroup.com. You can view this as well as our other training materials. So again, today we're going to talk about the customer returns in Infor FACTS. For the purpose of today's demo, we're going to be working with FACTS 7.7. So if we go to our menu and we go into sales orders, we have an option called customer returns. Now customer returns is a subsystem we refer to as the CRS, and it's an optional feature of the FACTS system. The CRS subsystem provides you with the ability to enter and track customer merchandise returns while improving customer service. The objective of the CRS module is to provide immediate response to customers who return merchandise for any reason while minimizing internal costs and maximizing internal controls over returned goods. For example, a customer wants to return a rotary drum pump for replacement. Since the pump is still under warranty, the vendor will replace it. A sales order, subject to the normal sales order processes, will be generated so that the new pump can be shipped to the customer. So what this allows us to do is this program allows us to actually create one of two options. We can start with a return authorization, and then we can take the return authorization document and turn it directly into a return itself. The return authorization document, the request is entered into the CRS document entry as an authorization. Since the original sale was also recorded on the system, the return can be tied to the past invoice. The authorization document number is given to the customer. Then, when the damaged merchandise is received, we can convert the return authorization document into a return document. Returns to stock or scrap result in an SO credit memo. Returns for repair or replacement result in a sales order. Returns to vendor results in an entry or quick vendor returns, so that when a credit or replacement is received from the vendor, the associated credit or replacement can be given to the customer. So what that allows us to do is give us better tracking of the system. The customer return documents allow us also to find the various documents. So let's look at some of the features here. We're going to look at the customer returns entry. We're going to go here into the screen, and we're going to either view an existing document, or in this case, we're just going to create a new document. So when I hit return to create a document, then we have an option. We can create the return document, which in essence would create the credit memo, or we're going to start off by creating a return authorization. So we're going to actually generate a return authorization, and we can give this to our customer for him to return the merchandise. We have our customer. We're just going to do a search, and let's select customer C100. Again, we can determine the warehouse we want. We're picking up the information, as you know, with FACTS from the customer file. Again, we can actually enter the customer's contract number if we want. We can do F3 for defaults, so we can just go ahead and put a contract if we want. We can specify a reference, and we can also look at the relationship management contact. If we had one here, we can do a search, and we can see we have a contact, Julie. We can put a reference, and so on if we wish. Here now we can actually look at the items. So we're going to do a search. We're going to select this first item, I-100. And we can see right now it's allowing us to search the past invoices. So we can do one of two options. We can search the full invoice to make sure, first of all, that this client actually bought from us. And if he did, we can attach it to that invoice so we can look at things like the cost, the price we charge them, and so on. So you have the option of entering the past invoice number if you know it. You can type it in. If you don't, you can do F1 for no past invoice. We can do a search with F2. So we're going to search, and we're going to see here that we have some invoices from this customer. So we're going to take this invoice here, this document, which is invoice 1646. And here we have our enter a reason code for the return. Again, we're using a default. We can actually do a search. So we can see in this case we set up some reason code. We have a customer damage on delivery, so we're not going to charge a fee. We can have that we shipped the wrong size or color, so again, no fee. And then we can also create ones that we want to charge a fee. We're going to go ahead and just select the first one. Here we can enter the disposition code. And this is important because this determines what's going to happen with the actual inventory. So we're going to actually do F2. And we can see here we have some disposition codes. We can define these. If we're going to credit the vendor, we're going to do replacements, and so on. We'll see this in a moment when we look at the actual setup of how each one of these react. We can do a quantity, so we're just going to put return 1. We can see the past invoice cost. Okay, this was the cost at the time of doing it, so we were going to go ahead and put in the same cost. We can see the past invoice price. So we charged him $156, $125, so we're going to use the same price. We're going to look at discounts. There was an invoice line discount, so we're going to go ahead and take that off. Again, we can see our vendor coming from the part. We can charge a restock fee, which we have set up, so we're going to do the standard $295. So go ahead and press F1, and we're going to press Enter to accept the line. Again, very straightforward, entering the information. So let's say that's all we have. So we're done with F3 and the entries, and I'm going to F3. And so we created here document number 000220, which is our document. Again, we can see here the customer return entry. We have a type, the customer return. You can see that we're generating it. We can actually enter some information for amounts. Just going to go ahead and say done. Now we have the option, do you want to convert this return authorization into a return document? We're not going to do this now. We're going to actually print this first, and we're going to come back later when the merchandise comes back. So we're going to say no at this point. And again, if we want to print the return authorization, we're going to go ahead and say yes. Okay. We don't have our authorization screen set up, so we'll have to print that at a later time. So now what we've done is we've created the document, return authorization 220. Now the merchandise comes back in. Very simple. We go into our return entry. We can then search the documents, or if we know the document, we can enter it. So we're just going to go down here. We're going to grab 220. We can see that it was an authorization. Again, we can make any changes to the lines. We're just going to do here F3. Go through the process. We want to convert this into a return document. So here we're going to say yes. And again, we have the option of printing it. And you can see that the document was created for the returns. If you look here, you can see 220. So we've created our document. So again, a very simple process. It's just kind of an extension of the FACTS software. This is allowing me to track that information. So now let's look at where some of the information came from. Let's look at our file maintenance. We have our return disposition code file maintenance. So here we're going to go ahead and we're going to search. And let's just pick up the first one. So you can see here we're just creating some codes. Again, we can control these. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a credit. We're going to credit the vendor, and we're going to do an application required to have it returned. We can make it valid for the customer return system, so we can use it here. We can do a disposition type. This is a return for credit. And then here we have some information. We want to return to the vendor. We say yes. We're going to actually return stock. No, because we're going to ssend it back to the vendor. Await vendor approval. We can set that up, so we have to get an acknowledgement from the vendor before we can do it. We're going to say no. Under warranty, it's not applicable for this case because we don't have a warranty card set up for this. Same with the print repair tickets. And here, number 10 is the CR returns code. This is an allowance, so we're actually creating an allowance versus a return. And then we have a corresponding GL information. Here, if we're returning the merchandise to inventory, we're going to be using our inventory account. If we're doing customer returns, we're going to affect, in this case, our sales account. And for our cost of sales. So the information I entered, that cost and cost of sales will be reflected here. So you can see here these were credits, and then this one here is a replacement. You see a little bit different. We're actually going to set this up, return to vendor, and do a replacement. So we can set those up in here. And the control file maintenance for the customer return subsystem is here, which again, we can set up so you can see here what we're doing. Require past invoices. We're not requiring a past invoice, so we have the option. You'll saw that F1. We have the option of always requiring a past invoice here. We can require a password if there's no past invoice. This is important depending on your type of business, because a lot of times what people do is they'll only return the stuff that they purchase. They don't want someone who purchased from the competition to bring it back to you, so you can actually set this up here. Allow temporary items. Again, you can give the ability of allowing a temporary item to be returned. So if we create temporary items in our standard facts, we can return those. You can not allow them, and you can require a password. You can deny credit, denial override. So if they go over their credit limit, you can, again, control that. You have your use. We're using returns history, authorizations, and acknowledgments. So we can do all that. We can have our default reason code, which you see here, and our default stocking fee. And again, we can create our items and so on. You can determine the forms, okay, and you can see the last CRS document that was used. And again, we can determine if we're using a non-preprinted or pre-printed form, or use the sales invoice form. Some people will have the acknowledgement print on the same form. So again, you have all that information here. So that allows us to actually create those codes. So let's go back now and look at, again, what we've done. So we've actually created this return. So we can look here at the returns acknowledgement, and again, we can look at return acknowledgements for credits or both. We can look at all the lines, or the lines that are not yet printed. So we can go here and put in our 000220, see what we get. We can click OK. And again, we're looking at our print of what we did. We can see here the customer information as well as the bill to ship to information. We can see the reference we put, the terms, the document numbers, 220. We can see the information, and of course we did the restocking charge, so we have our restocking charge. Let's close that. So let's see what else we have. We have some inquiry screens. As you're used to with facts, we have the inquiry, so we can look at the customer return inquiries. We can search for only open and pass, so we're going to go here and search for open. And again, you can see if we scroll through, we can find our 220. And again, here we are in the system. So we have the ability of looking at that information. So we can look at the returns. We can print the acknowledgments, as we saw here. We need to reprint them. We can look at the status report. This is a nice report because it allows me to look at, again, all information, because we can have open and close invoices as well as older invoices we want. So let's just go to our print options. Let's just set this to, we can put it on the screen. So again, we can determine if we want it in the document order, the customer, or the item order. We can make our selections. Since we're doing document order, we can search our documents. Or we can do first to last. We can look at all our warehouses. Again, reason codes, all the information, statuses, and so on. It gives us a nice little report that we can see here. And based on what those were, you can see the information here, and you can see the one we did right here. So let's recap real quick what we've gone through. We're talking about in the sales order menu, we have the customer returns, which is a subsystem in FACTS for doing return authorizations and return acknowledgments. It'll eventually generate, this will actually go, as we go through the process, we'll create the credit memo. Again, it's an option. You can go directly to the credit and create the credit. But this is good because what it allows you to do is actually create a return authorization for your customer. It also allows you to go in and see what is out there, see if the person actually bought it from you. So again, it's a simple process where we go into our return entry. You can see here we can actually call up an existing number or just create our next number. We can determine if we want to do a return document or a return authorization. We can select our customer. Again, we can change any information we want on that customer. We can enter a contact number. We can enter the relationship management contact as well as a reference. We can then enter an item. And here we can actually have the option, and we saw that in the static control setup, that we now have the option of having no past invoice or searching or doing a default. So we're going to search, and again, we can just select the one we want. We're going to use the same one because they ordered 10. See, we've already returned that, so let's find another one. We'll just go back here. Let's take this one here. We've already returned it, all of those. I guess we have the same here, so we'll just continue on with that. Again, we can look at our disposition codes. As we saw before, if we're going to replace, we're going to repair, we're going to issue a credit. We can look at the quantity. We can look at the cost, as well as the price, and any discounts we have on the line. Again, we have a standard stocking fee. And we're done with the order. We have order 221. And again here, we can call the order back up. And when we're ready, we can actually, we saw that we can call it back up and we can do the print the return authorization. We're going to say no. So now what we can do is we can call it back up. At this point, we can make any changes we want. So we can just go ahead and F3 end. And it's going to ask us, do we want to convert the return authorization into the return document? We're going to go ahead and say yes. And now we've created that document. So again, very simple process to go through, very easy to work with. So we see that. We can also do on some of the vendor returns, we can do a quick vendor return. The function of the quick vendor return is the vendor return entry program gives you the ability to view and maintain the status of vendor returns that are tied to customer returns. Entries to this module are automatic when the customer returns with the disposition of return to vendor for credit, replacement, or repair is processed. When appropriate, this program will update the status codes of the CR document lines. And once it is recorded, you can actually then eventually remove it. So the quick vendor returns is just a way of acknowledging here that, again, we can put the document in here if we have one. We're just going to go next record. And you can see here, it's just letting us know that we actually brought this merchandise in. We have it in the system. We're going to actually return it to the vendor for repair. So again, it just gives us the ability of doing a quick one. You can see it's going to pull up, in this case, the document 197 that we have, and you can see the vendor. So we can just go ahead and enter this information so we find the one we want. And there's our document 220. So there we are. And we can change the line if we want and make any changes to it. So again, it's just a way of tracking the information and the quick return. So that concludes today's session. Just to review, what we talked about today is in our Infor FACTS version 7.7, we talked about the customer returns. The customer returns is a subsystem that's built into FACTS, which allows us to do return authorizations, track return authorizations, and then eventually turn them into the credit. As we said before, this webinar is being recorded. They're available on our website. You can visit us at www.michellgroup.com to view this as well as our other recordings. Once again, this concludes our webinar today, and we thank you very much for your time.